right, there we go. Should I take off the glasses? Am I throwing you off? There, they're off. You feel better now? More comfortable? Relaxed? All right, here we go. What I want to talk about is this notion in science of falsifiability. It is the idea that there is no good reason to believe a claim if there is no plausible situation in which the claim could be proven false. That might seem counterintuitive at first, but the idea, and actually I have a video about this before, the situation was that they were testing crystal kinesthesiology, the idea that you could hold a crystal and the crystal would give you an increase of strength, and this is tested through kinesthesiology, the idea that you hold out your arm and someone pushes on your arm and it is a subjective feeling as to whether or not you feel strong. Okay, so lots of subjective metrics involved here. Lots of skeptical flags should be raised, but it gets even better. When this was done in a double-blind test such that the crystal was put into one of, I think, 5 bags, where the other bags were filled with rat poison, the test was repeated with James Randi conducting the experiment, and the woman was strengthened not by the crystal as she was previously just seconds before, but by one of those bags of rat poison. And the crystal kinesthesiologist simply said, well then, rat poison must be good for Sophia, I think was her name. That is a situation in which we have come to an unfalsifiable claim. That is not a valid basis of defending your position. The only way we can remain intellectually honest is for the theists not only to give us a description of the situations to, or the reasons to believe God exists, but to demonstrate that the null, the antithesis in logic, the null hypothesis in science, the antithesis in logic, cannot possibly be conceivable, meaning he has to define those terms in which it is inconceivable that he is correct. That might seem like we want to, might seem counterproductive. You might seem like, no, I should only be able to put forth the absolute strongest argument and not worry about everything else. But the only way that theists are going to be intellectually honest in their defense of God is to define, alongside the reasons for believing in God, the reasons which it would necessarily follow that God didn't exist. The theist needs to define those reasons and then prove that those reasons are absolutely absurd. Only in that line of reasoning can we get away from this idea that God is evidence proof, because that is what theologians present in a regular basis. They give us a conception of God that is so high-tech that it escapes even evidence itself. If you believe that God exists in the empirical world, you need to provide us with other means of proving against the existence of God, and then your job as the theologian is to show that that means of proving the existence of God to be false is either that it doesn't logically follow or that it must rely on absurd premises. Do you see? You don't have to contradict yourself. You have to simply say, okay, fine, you believe in God. This is why I believe in God, for reasons X, Y, and Z, and I am going to be wrong if X, Y, and Z are actually true. It's the same thing that we see in logical, mathematical logic, when the mathematician could be working on an equation and sort of stand back when it's completed and say, ah, behold, there it is. And someone stumbles into the room and says, wow, what have you done? He says, I don't know, but it's done. And you talk with mathematicians, they'll smile about that kind of thing. It's all based on the same idea that, for example, a mathematical equation can have a concept of infinite or infinity. If I could just get my right tenses wrong. I don't speak English normally. That's a lie. If the concept of infinity is not based in reality, if there is no such thing as infinity, then any equation that uses that in its terms is going to be uninformative of the actual world. It is the logical equivalent of being based on a false premise. If we were to translate somehow that mathematical equation into a syllogism, it would begin with a premise somewhere in there that infinity is real, that infinity exists. And if it doesn't, those conclusions in the syllogism, just like in the mathematical equation, would not be informative of the world. So in every situation here, the mathematician has to be able to bring out that premise that he's stating, that he's assuming that, okay, this is my great grand formula. It believes that infinity exists. My great grand formula, as much as I like it, is not going to work out if this underlying premise of God, I'm so dyslexic today, of infinity doesn't exist. It's because I'm arguing for atheism. My brain is like, what are you doing, man? Anyway, also the theologian, that's why the theologian will, or the logician, man, I am a wreck today, but the theologian that is a logician will put forth their premises in a very explicit sort of way. And certainly William Lane Craig makes a point of this in the debates I've seen of him anyway, and so that's a step in the right direction. You need to be able to put out those premises so that they can be dissected in detail and not have them just sort of in a subliminal or in a suggested or inferred kind of a way. That's begging the question. That's the definition of the thing. Which I should berate some of my atheist colleagues for misusing the term. It's just everyone runs around with this notion of logical fallacy and all these different words, begging the question, straw man, this and that, whatever else. Never mind. And they don't use them. They don't use them correctly. Begging the question is simply implying a premise without making it explicit. So too, then, finally, what I'm trying to get at here is that the theologian needs to not only give us the logical proof for the existence of something that exists beyond the empirical, but the logical proof that would be necessary to prove his position wrong. It doesn't mean it has to be that it has to follow, that you have to contradict yourself. Ultimately, it's up to the theologian to demonstrate why that counterclaim, that antithesis is absurd. But without it, we're dealing with a super duper Santa Claus that is invisible, that doesn't smell, doesn't make any noise, whatever else is undetectable and unfalsifiable. If that is your concept of God, that defeats itself. It is not, there's no logical basis to believe in something that cannot be falsified.